Hi everyone, Morella here. Before I start today's video, just a quick apology in advance. I'm really sorry if there is any coughing or sneezing during this video. I've been trying to shift a really nasty cold for the last week and a bit, and unfortunately I'm still a little sick. However, I really wanted to get that video up there, and I've decided that I will probably not be able to do it for the next few days, if not weeks, if I keep waiting to get healthy. So yeah, hopefully we'll survive, but do apologize and bear with me if I get a coughing or a sneezing fit for a moment. I'll try to pause it anyways, not to make you go through it. So today's video is a little bit of a different one. However, it is in a way linked to stuff I've done before, because it is a response in a way to a video by Diane from Die's Crafty Corner. She's doing another really cool initiative where she's asking for 10 or more or less, but either way, tips and tricks for crafts. So she's asking YouTubers that follow her to kind of do a tag. I think it's a hashtag 10 crafty tips or tricks tag. Either way, I'll link to it and it'll be in my video description as well, so you'll know what the hashtag and what the tag is. But I think it's pretty cool, especially for people who maybe are new to crafts and maybe card making or other arts and crafts. And I think it's really nice to kind of share our tips and tricks, because stuff might seem normal to some of us, but maybe others don't know about it, and I think it's really nice to share the information and have one tag where all of that information is kind of under. So yeah, Diane is mentioning in her video that you can pretty much do the video on any crafts you want to, so whatever it is that you do or whatever information you have that you want to share in terms of tips and tricks, you're more than welcome to do it. I'll be doing that on card making primarily, because this is what I mostly focus at the moment and what I mostly have tips and tricks about, if any. Just so that you know, my ones are pretty basic. I don't think there is really anything there that is very advanced. Not all of the tips and tricks are my own ones. I'll let you know if I know the sources of them. But yeah, I thought, you know, like a few times it happened to me that I was actually chatting to some of the more advanced card makers who, you know, have been out there for years and have loads of followers and so on, and I'd mention, oh, did you know this was done that way or the other, and they were like, oh really, I didn't know that. So it doesn't matter that, you know, you might be new or you might be advanced, you might still not know certain things. So like I said, something might seem very obvious to me and it might be less obvious to someone out there, so I thought I'd share a few of my tips anyways. So to start with, I wanted to mention the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now this is the mini cube. They come also obviously in a normal pad, which I also have, but I like using the mini cube. In terms of the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, I think not everyone realizes that you can actually use this as the embossing ink for heat embossing. So I know obviously most of us most probably look for Versamark or maybe the Ranger or Simon Says Stamp embossing inks for heat embossing, which is obviously there's nothing wrong with it. But one thing that annoys me with heat embossing is heat embossing in black. The black embossing powders are driving me absolutely insane. I can never get good results, and or in addition to this, they are also very, very messy. There it starts. Apologies. So yeah, black embossing powders, I personally find them super messy. So my tip number one is you can use your VersaFine Onyx Black ink as your embossing ink if you want to have embossing in black. So what you can do is basically you stamp whatever image or sentiment you want to have in black embossing, black heat embossing, and you stamp that on paper. And it stays wet for long enough that you can still put embossing powder on top of it and it'll stick. So I usually stamp images in black and then put clear embossing powder on top of it, and it is perfectly fine for me. I have then either a black sentiment or black outline or whatever else I want to have heat and embossed. It looks like as if I used black embossing powder, but I actually used clear one. So it's a nice saving tip because you don't have to use or buy a black embossing powder. and also it's probably an ink that most of you would have at homes, and it's really good to use for heat embossing. So that's my first tip. And speaking of heat embossing and versifying, something that is also probably already known to most of you, but if you like watercoloring, like I personally don't actually own any proper watercolors, but I like watercoloring with the use of my distress inks. And what I find very useful is exactly heat embossing an image using my VersaFine Onyx Black and then putting clear embossing powder on top of it, and then painting or colouring my image. I find that the raised edges that you get thanks to the heat embossing make the watercolouring much easier. Now that depends as well, of course, on what you really want to watercolour. If you want it to be a messy, flowy background, then obviously you don't really need little spaces to put colour into. But if it's a small detailed image, or like for example a floral image where you want to have each petal coloured separately and so on, the heat embossing really helps. You can kind of paint each of the little spaces quite quickly next to each other, and they will most likely not bleed to each other and so on. So it's really nice. I have a few here images by the gorgeous girls from Santoro, and I don't know if you can see it there. Oh, there, I think. These have been heat embossed. So I stamped them with Versamark Black and then heat embossed them in clear, and it'll make my images really much easier to watercolor using my distress inks. Plus you get a lovely shine and a bit of a raise on the paper as well, which is also nice if you're into those kind of things. So I really like doing that. And my tip number 3 is to get yourself a Fiskars eraser, an adhesive eraser. I know not only Fiskars does it, there's a few other companies that make it. It looks pretty similar though. It looks like a kind of hard yellow sponge. It's really great for removing any of your dry adhesive. So if you use your snail adhesive or your ATG and it gets into places that you don't want it, it's brilliant for removing it. It's also nice sometimes for lifting a little bit of a smudge and so on, depending on the paper and the ink. But it's very handy. It's a very cheap tool, but I think it's really handy, especially if you're a bit of a freak like me and you don't like your adhesive showing anywhere and so on. Like even you can lift sometimes if you have the likes of liquid glues, if they dry a little bit. Like I wouldn't say glossy accents can be removed, but bits and pieces of the likes of Tombow Mono multi-glue or Tombow Mono liquid glue or the multimedia matte, they can sometimes be slightly shifted as well if you have a bit of a blob sticking out of an image or something with it. So mostly for dry adhesive like the snail ones or an ATG, like I said, but it's very handy. So a little cheap tool, but very handy. So I would recommend every new card maker or scrapbooker to invest in one, because it comes really handy and saves you very often. Next one, in terms of getting rid of small boo-boos that we make on our colouring or coloured images. Obviously there's a lot of ways. The ones that I like using mostly is using either a little bit of a sanding block. I actually can't find mine at the moment. It's a very fine sanding block. You can also use, if you have like one of those, I call it pokey tools or piercing tools, you can use the edge of it, or if you even have like an X-Acto knife or a cutting knife, you know, with the blade of it, you can try to scrape a little bit off the paper. And what also helps very often on little blobs of colours that we don't want are white gel pens. So the ones I use are the Uniball Signo white gel pen or the Sakura Jelly Roll one, and depending on papers really I use kind of both of them, and they're very handy sometimes if you go outside the lines a little when you're colouring and so on. So again, I think something if you're maybe new to card making or crafting that you might want to invest in is a white gel pen, because they come handy for fixing little boo-boos here and there. And another tick, I don't know why I keep saying tick, I'm sorry. Another tip or trick in terms of white gel pens, they sometimes don't want to start writing nicely on paper. Obviously something that has been known, I think, for everyone. Try starting your gel pen on your finger. The kind of warmth of your finger and the structure of it usually helps the ball rolling, and it'll start working for you perfectly. You'll end up with a bit of an icky finger with white gel pen, but if you watch Daddy Dice or Diane's video, then she'll tell you how you can remove those stains from your finger. That's one of her tips. Yeah, another bit of a tip related again to heat embossing. A lot of us surely have either an embossing buddy like this or an EK Success powder tool and so on. I know a good few card makers and crafters who have never invested in one of these, and they just use plain kitchen flour for heat embossing. So basically that's just to remove the static cling and, you know, your kind of oils from your fingers and so on from the paper, so that the images, so that the heat embossing is kind of nice and clear, and the powder doesn't stick to places that you don't want it to. I actually personally have never used the kitchen flour, but I've heard from a lot of people that it works great. So if you run out of this, or if you want to try heat embossing but you don't want to invest too much money in all the tools, give it a go with kitchen flour and a bit of a paintbrush and brush it on your paper, and that is told to work as well. Another little tip in terms of organization this time is something that I actually did now that I moved to Helsinki recently, and I was always very upset about my scraps of paper. I don't like throwing away scraps of paper, I like to hoard them, but I used to have a drawer full of them, and I never really looked there because finding something in there was just impossible. And as I was moving my whole craft room to here, I just found, you know, I just dumped all the piles of paper into a box, and that was pretty much it. So when I was organizing my room here, I decided to do something about it, and what I did was I just basically took those sheet page protectors and I organized all of my scraps by colors. So I have one for blue, I have one for, you know, green paper, and so on and so forth. And I have folders where I keep all of them, and I keep them in rainbow colors, which makes them look really pretty on my desk, because I have all the nice folders with the lovely colors in rainbow order there. And I have to tell you, I have been using my scraps since a lot. Now, I haven't had the chance to craft that much, but the little bit that I did craft since I moved here, I am using loads of my scrap paper, because I just go, oh, okay, I need something blue. Do I have a blue paper? And all I need to go through is this, which is not as difficult as going through a whole pile of paper where I don't even know what kind of colors I might have there. So organize your scraps by colors, and you'll be very grateful to yourself for doing that, I can assure you, because you're actually going to start using up your scraps. First of all, it saves you space because it's nicely organized, you know, it's not just a pile of paper that either takes up a whole drawer or, you know, keeps falling off your desk or wherever you store it. It's nicely organized that way, but also really, really helpful, and it's really easy to find whatever you're looking for from your scraps, and it uses them up beautifully. So I'm really happy that finally my massive pile of scrap paper is getting good use. So try organizing them by color and see if it works for you as well. Another little tip and trick, now that's something a lot of us do, if you like coloring images and you fussy cut your images. I actually happen to have here a little birdie from Pretty Pink Posh. And so I personally don't actually buy a lot of matching dies. I am not always a big fan of the white border around the images. I most of the time prefer to have the nice just image itself. I don't necessarily like having the border the dies give us. So I like fussy cutting, and that's also a saving tip. If you don't buy your dies, your matching dies, obviously it's a big saving tip. So yeah, I have to say I own loads of stamp sets, but not that many matching dies sets. So I fussy cut most of my images unless I, you know, stamp them directly on the card. But what is really nice, and that's definitely something for new card makers out there, if you like fussy cutting your images to use them on the card, when you fussy cut them, however good job you do, there will always be a bit of a white border around your image, which is simply the white border of the paper that you stamped your image on and cut it out of, which always kind of looks a bit messy, and it makes it look like you cut it really wrong, as in, you know, that you didn't really make it nice and even lines and so on. Now, a very, very simple tip that most of us out there card makers do is just outlining all of this with a black marker. Now, it can be any black marker. The easiest ones are the ones that have a brush tip, I use two because I actually happen to have two. One of them is a Tombow one, and the other one is a Memento marker. And basically what you want is you want to have a nice brush nib, because it's much easier that way to work with the images. And once you have your fussy cut image, you just go all around all the image with your brush marker, and basically that gives you a nice finished line, and it also makes the image look like you cut it out pretty much perfectly, because it looks like you went spot on the black line of the image. So something probably most of us know, but I thought, you know, since I'm already making a video about it, why not mention that as well. Excuse me. What else can I say? Oh yeah, one tip that Christina Werner made very popular, and she got that tip from one of her subscribers or followers on YouTube, is using the foam tape if you're making, for example, shaker cards especially, and if you want to use your foam tape around a circular shape or cutout shape. It used to be quite daunting for a lot of people to do circular shaker cards, because putting all the little pieces, you know, of craft foam around a circle was a pretty daunting and long process, let's face it. Was, you know, if you had a square, you just put a few strips of foam tape, it was much easier. What you can do if you have foam tape, now forgive me for this one, this is an atrocious bad, super sticky, but not to the places it should be, foam tape, but I want to show you on this example. If you take your foam tape and you try to bend it to put it around a circle, you can't really do it. It's going to bend awkwardly and you can't do anything about it. You'd need to cut little pieces and put it around the circle. Now, if you actually remove the release paper of the other side of that tape, so you've got the glue already on both sides, it becomes much more bendy. And as you can see, the reason I brought that cheap bad tape is most crafters out there use the fancy expensive Scotch one, or you know, some other brands double-sided tapes, but I wanted to show you that even with the super cheap ones it works also. Once you remove the release paper, the foam becomes very, very kind of bendy, and you can shape it nicely around a circle and make a shaker card much easier that way. Or if you want to just raise whatever image or something, this is a great tip, really, just removing that release paper and being able to, you know, bend your paper, your foam tape, and shape it in a circular motion. I think that's, or circular shape, I think that's really brilliant. And my final tip, I'm not even sure if that's 10, but I'm hoping it's close to 10 anyways, is, that's my personal motto, but I'm sure again lots of crafters and card makers also go by it. My motto is, if you can't fix it, make a feature out of it. And what I mean by that is, all of us make mistakes. We all have, you know, colouring that goes outside of the lines. We all have that splotch of an ink or a blob of glue that suddenly gets somewhere in the middle of the card where we completely don't want it. We all get, you know, wonky lines, bad alignment, you name it. Try not to straight away throw away your project and just, you know, give up and think that you have to start from scratch and from start. Very often there's something that you can do about it, and you can come up with an idea, and sometimes actually that idea even makes a feature of your card, which is why I say, if you can't fix it, make a feature out of it. Very often I had smears on my cards where I suddenly put a bit of a ribbon or something, and it actually became a really nice feature on the card. I would have never thought before to use the ribbon, but after I added it, I was like, oh wow, it actually looks much better that way. You know, there's enamel dots, there's lots of bling and little flowers, you name it, you know, maybe a little stamped image that you can add somewhere, a little dot or something of a colour of the ink, for example, that you have a splotch of. So there's loads of different ways you can sometimes make your image a little bit smaller. You know, I mean, there's hundreds of things. You can try to mount your paper on a bit of a different shaped paper or whatever, and it can even out a little bit an uneven shape. Like, there's probably hundreds of different ways you can fix your project, but I'd say never give up straight away. Never think straight away that because you made a blob somewhere or you know, something went wrong on your project that you have to straight away scrap it. Maybe even, you know, it's as simple as sometimes you have a lovely scene colored and you made a complete mess out of it. Maybe at least you can cut out a few images. I'm not saying that was the case, but maybe you can at least cut out an image or two of the whole scene and fix that way, you know, part of what you colored and what you worked hard on. Like I said, there's really lots of scenarios here and lots of ways of fixing it. But I would really always say, stick to your project till the end and try to fix it. And you never know, it might actually come out really nicely when you try fixing it. Like the other day I was making a card, you know, where again, it was a nice, clean and simple card. There was only a little bit of an image inside, or in the center of the card. Everything around was white. And suddenly my finger must have been inky, and I just got a blob of ink on the side, and it looked awful. However, I added a few enamel dots here and there, and to be honest with you, it looks great now. Like, it maybe isn't as clear and simple as I wanted it to be, but it's still a pretty card. So yeah, just don't give out, don't give up, and really try to make a feature out of it. Sometimes actually fixing boo-boos and mistakes can make a whole new project and a whole new idea, and it can actually become better than your original idea. And even if it's not, at least it's not a project that is binned. You might still use it for something else. So yeah, I think these are all the tips that I wanted to share with you. I know they're very, very basic, but like I said, you know, we all started somewhere, and I remember when I was starting card making, I was looking for a lot of basic ideas, and I thought these maybe in one video, you know, put together might be helpful to someone. If you have any tips and tricks that you want to share yourself, please do so. It would be lovely to watch all of those videos under the tag that Diane suggested. Like I said, I'm going to link to Diane's video. You can watch her tips and tricks, and you can also see the details of her initiative. And if I remember correctly, there might even be prizes involved as well. Knowing Diane, there is prizes, because Diane likes giving out prizes to people. So if you make that video with the tips and tricks, let Diane know, and you might be also, I think, entered into a giveaway. But like I said, you'll need to have a look at her video and hear all about it from her. Now, I apologize if this video is so long, but I tried to kind of give a little bit more of a description rather than just throwing tips and tricks at you. Since they are basic ones, I thought that, you know, it will be mostly for new card makers, so I need to explain the details a little bit better. If you have any questions about any of what I said, you know, if anything wasn't clear, let me know. I'm happy to get back to you and explain. You know, just write a comment or send me a message. Excuse me. And if there's any other tips and tricks that you have, either make a video and let me know about it, because I'll be happy to hear about it, or leave me a comment as well about something additional that I haven't thought about and maybe is related to the topics that I raised here. I think sharing tips and tricks is always great. We get to know a lot of ideas and make our lives easier. So I hope there is at least one thing that you found handy here. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.